Hey folks, how's it going? You're listening to Prophecy Montana. My name is Kerry Martin, your host. And listen, in the theme of the world theater and how things are playing out, it's getting pretty hot out there, isn't it? We've already talked about, volcanoes, and earthquakes are, happening all over the world. And certainly these are all signs of the ends of days and fires breaking out. And we're seeing all kinds of natural catastrophes, hurricanes and tornadoes at record magnitudes, and there seems to be so many people involved in these conflicts. And now we have Russia and Ukraine, at war. And really, this is more than just Russia and Ukraine. It seems like the whole world is involved in this political theater, this new political theater. The so-called virus is kind of petering out, if you will. So they had to come up with something new. And so here we go. This is it. Isn't it interesting that the president of the Ukraine, is a former actor, now, the president of a country. And, these things always make me wonder when I see them. And they're just very curious is all. Yeah, is there anything to it? I don't know. I don't have deep enough insight to be able to see what, some of the things that are happening behind the scenes. But you can imagine, pretty much we know that most media outlets are liars, and everything they say, you could pretty much just go 180 from the narrative, and you're pretty close to, being on truth, on point. And, this is undoubtedly going to benefit many people financially. I mean, a war is very profitable. Heck, a virus is very profitable. Just imagine the arms deals that's going to be, made during all of this. And, a lot of people are going to be making money. Of course, there's a tremendous loss of life. I mean, innocent life at that. And that's the tragedy in all of this. Satan, he doesn't care who gets hurt along the way. He has no benevolence for mankind. In fact, he hates mankind. And so, by serving him with our life choices, we're doing nothing but to empower his psychotic machine and his psychotic machinery. And this whole thing really is a big rescue mission. Jesus has come down and he's made a declaration, that this world is now belongs to him again. Now presently it's still under the rule of Satan. Jesus Christ, he won it back at the cross, and he gave all of mankind a way to get out of this life of sin. And it's funny, we spoke briefly about freedom, in the previous video that I had. What is freedom really? And people, their idea of freedom is to be able to steep themselves in vice and sin and smoke and drink and gamble. And these are these symbols of freedom, so-called, that we have nowadays. And it's ridiculous, really. And in fact, all these things do is entrap us and enslave us. And I can speak from personal experience, and probably many of you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say these things. But the young and gullible mind, and the mind that's easily influenced, manage these things in their mind and manipulate them. They can be manipulated to the point where you can actually be made to believe that, smoking and drinking and gambling and sin in general is freedom from God's law. You don't have to marry. You can just shack up and do whatever. Freedom from, you can lie and you can steal and you can cheat and do whatever you want, basically. And that's freedom from the law, basically, right? Well, it sounds like total chaos to me. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the world more and more, as God's law is being rejected. So the fight in Ukraine is indeed getting hot. These poor people that are involved are really taking its toll. What can we say about these world leaders? How much in control are they really, and who is in charge, and what is really going on behind the scenes? It just all really starts to make you wonder. You have this sense of, things are somewhat out of control. There is no unity. There is no consolidation in Satan's forces. And, even in his own kingdom, Jesus himself said that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand, meaning Satan's kingdom, after he was accused of being, casting out demons in the name of Beelzebub. So all these things that Jesus says, they have meaning behind them. And you have to wonder how divided is Satan's kingdom, and how fractured is it? How divided is his forces? And, when you have a system which is based upon selfishness and greed and just a love of power, nobody's your friend. That's why you see these world leaders that are so, they have to protect themselves because they don't know who's plotting against them. They don't know what's what, and probably very similar for Satan and his kingdom. And so you see all these different forces working at once. If they could just consolidate, they might be able to deceive mankind completely and wholly altogether. And of course you have God's hand in this whole thing too. He's holding back the winds of strife, and so there's a big play. Nothing happens without God's knowledge, and but unfortunately, when we reject God to the point where He can no longer have a hand in our lives, then we're given fully over to the devil. And there's no telling what horrible things that can be done from that point forward. Our world, as this time gets closer and closer to the end, as we see things starting to wrap themselves up, come to a close, we see this selfishness and this love of power and this hatred and maliciousness and malevolency, spread across the globe, present in almost every organization and almost every person now, and individually. Everybody's striving for rights, for rights, for rights, for rights for what? The Bible says we basically lost all of our rights when we sinned against God. Now we have basically our only obligation to be put to death, and that's the reality of it. But God has redeemed us. He's given us, His redeeming power has set us free. And so, what does that mean? Well, there should be a great appreciation for this great sacrifice that Christ has made on our behalves, and that gives us an obligation to go out and practice benevolence to our neighbors and to our fellow man. But this is not what we're seeing. This is not the case. All of this other, if there wasn't enough confusion already, we have now all these talks about alien invasions, and you have even channels on the Discovery and History that are just solely focused on nothing but alien invasions, and even the DOD and the government has now admitted that these beings exist. These whatever they are, I think they know what they are. I mean, the code word alien, is basically means demon, and they know what these forces are. These forces have always been on earth since mankind has been on earth. I mean, they were banished from heaven. That's what the Bible says. A third of the angels fell from heaven and were sent down to this earth. At one time, they were, Satan was allowed to deceive all of the nations, all of the other worlds. And he had his tree. There was a tree of knowledge of good and evil on all of the different worlds, all over the galaxy. But only one fell, and that was mankind, the only one that was made in God's image. With this, we've put ourselves in a real pickle. Because now Satan has claimed him, that this is his kingdom. And in fact, we have pled our allegiance to him in the very beginning, but God has won it back for us, like we've already mentioned. These forces, they're playing themselves out. You have to go up the chain of leadership and find out what's really going on and what the motivation for all of this is. Well, we know that Satan has put motivation in people's mind, the greed of money, that's low level motivation there. And I say low level because I think, the greed of power and control supersedes it. People would much rather have control over other people and tell them what to do beyond riches and wealth. And this is the ultimate goal of Satan, is to have total control over mankind, to be able to exercise that control with impunity. And ultimately all he really wants to do is destroy every last single image of this creature that God has called man and made in his own image. It's so much more easier to people, to believe in some alien force that's come down and created mankind. That's easy for them to believe, right? Well, where did the alien force come from? Where did their intelligence come from and their physiological, their physiology? This idea of evolution we know is false. It's mathematically impossible. You can't do the math. It never comes out. This idea that so many things have to come together, thousands and thousands and thousands of circumstances, just to create one cell. And then you got to do that over and 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 over again, millions and billions and trillions of times to create, and all of these cells have to be working in unison and have to be created exactly the same way. It's a mathematical impossibility. I think somebody had put a number out there like 10 to the power of 27 or 37. I watched a lecture some years ago on it, and it was more than all the the likelihood of these things taking place was greater than all the particles in the entire universe. And basically, and for it to happen over and over and over and over again, it's not just like a one-time event and boom, and then life gets started and then it just goes from there, and then it begins to grow. No, science has proven that these things are individual, but yet they have this co-intermingling, where each cell is kind of like its own entity, but it works in concert with all of the other cells, and every cell in itself is a miracle in and of itself. And within ourselves, we have trillions of miracles, and every living creature that is made in its own kind has trillions of cells. And then you get into the problem of reproduction, and And that's even more mind-boggling. And I know evolutionists, they've got it all explained for the simple-minded. This just all happens, and it's kind of ridiculous, really. I mean, this speaks of design. And really, the only place that we read of design is in the Bible. The reason why the Bible is so fact-worthy is that everything has never been, there's nothing in the Bible that's ever been proved wrong. So we've had some videos in the past of, earthquakes and volcanic activity, meteorological activity. We've had, tornadoes, hurricanes, destruction all around the world, tsunamis and stuff. All of these point towards the second coming of Christ. And now, you have to wonder, is this war, between Ukraine and Russia, is it prophetic? Does the Bible even speak of it? And yeah, it does speak generally of wars and rumors of wars. I don't think, in these last days that, we can nail down specifically what each war is, biblically. But here's the thing. These things we know are going to happen, and it's going to get very bad. There's going to be a time of trouble such as never was. Brace yourself. This, so many people out there, it's funny because, Ukraine, just days before it was attacked, the people, we're under the impression that nothing was going to happen, that life was going to go on. Nobody was taking preparations. Nobody was purchasing food. Nobody was preparing for this invasion from Russia. And no matter what you think about, this whole political theater that's taken place over there in Russia. I mean, me personally, I think that, the crisis of this, pandemic has been winding down for some time now. Now they need a new crisis, and quite frankly, it's a very profitable crisis as that. I mean, we claim to be putting sanctions against Russia, and we claim to be putting all these tough, sanctions against them, when in reality, half of the world's energy is purchased from Russia. I mean, Europe is very dependent upon fuel as well as America now. I mean, we've shut down all of our sources. At one time we were energy independent. So you have to wonder, are we supporting this war in some way? I mean, the very evil plan behind this whole free energy thing. And so never let a good crisis go to waste, and that's kind of the mantra, and so we have these world leaders and they're all vying for power, and you're wondering why, well, if this is all being controlled by Satan, why does it look so fractured? I mean, wouldn't it be smart for him to consolidate his forces and not be fighting against one another? God's kingdom is not divided. It is very consolidated. It's consolidated under the banner of love and under his law, which is basically a definition of love and what love is. Satan's trying to get rid of the law. That's his main goal. I mean, you're seeing more and more in the courts and in the news how the murderers are getting off, and the people who are innocent are being put away for long periods of time and being persecuted. And this is just completely backwards from what God has originally intended for mankind. This is a big problem, because all it does is it leads to confusion, it leads to chaos, and it leads to destruction in the end. And I used to wonder how the Israelites could put themselves under captivity so easily, and how they could just fall under the rule of another's power, so quickly. And it's easy to see now, because people are basically giving up their rights. When you give up your solidarity to God, your connection to God, you're basically saying goodbye to all your rights. And we've swallowed these lies that freedom is a freedom to sin, is a freedom to fall under vice and corruption. And really, that's not freedom at all. And we're seeing the fruits of this now. This is Satan's ultimate plan, is to really destroy mankind. Now, I think deep down inside in his psychotic mind, maybe he believes that this somehow his form of government will ultimately succeed, but there's just no way it will. We see that selfishness and vice and malevolence is just a downward spiral into perdition, where mankind basically is self-destructing. We can see the fruits of that all over the world. God's angels are holding back the winds of strife, but if you're sitting there begging God to leave you alone, to get out of your life and to not have any more influence over you and your family, what are you really saying? I mean, he's a God that respects our choices, and if we choose for him to be out of our lives, if we choose to exclude him from his protection, exclude ourselves from his protection, and then what else is he left with? Then we're wide open to Satan's attacks, and we could even openly worship Satan, and he would still eventually, he knows we're all eventually going to be doomed anyways. He doesn't have any love towards mankind. Remember that mankind was made in God's image. I know it's hardly conceivable now that we could even be compared to the image of God at the condition that we're in now. And that's exactly, what gives the devil so much, pleasure, is that he's looking down upon mankind and he's seeing how deranged we actually are. And he loves this because really what it does is it mars the image of God. It smears God's image. And by doing this to man, by creating these circumstances, which, I think a lot of this stuff we probably create on our own. We do have sinful natures, and we can sit there and concoct a lot of this stuff on our own. And so this is very much what we see happening in Satan's kingdom as well. And that's why we don't see this consolidation of forces. We see everything being fractured, just helter-skelter, and very confusing and not very easy to follow at all. And conspiracy theorists would have you to believe that these are very well organized and planned, attacks against, certain parts of humanity and goodness or whatever. And it's not particularly well planned, and it's not particularly well thought out. I mean, these things that are taking place are very helter-skelter, and this is kind of the mantra of Satan's kingdom, that out of chaos there can be order somehow. It doesn't make sense. Out of chaos, you're left with rubble, basically. I mean, that's the end result of war, right? I mean, there's no information that you're going to get from the media that's going to be even near true. We can draw general conclusions about what's taking place, but the ultimate goal here really is just power, control, money, and greed, and not necessarily in that order, but that is the end result. I mean, there's going to be lots of money made on arms. We know that. I mean, these arms producers are just making tons of money on now probably renewed contracts. UN is ramping up its forces, and because of this great threat of Russia now, and Russia basically is just saying, hey, look, we don't want the UN so close to our borders. It'd be like Russia going to Mexico and making buddies with Mexico, and then putting missiles along our border between Mexico and U.S. It's kind of the same circumstances. In some ways you can't even blame Putin, but on the other hand, the participants, the embattlements that are involved in all of this, they're the ones that are really taking the brunt of this war. They're the ones that are suffering the most, or the innocents. On both sides, we're seeing great patriotism and stuff like that, which is always present in war. You see the best and the worst of humanity always. But in this world of sin, there will be a day where, war will no longer rage. I was listening to Russell Brand the other day, and he was talking about the ultimate solution to mankind, and how he was talking about how we need this one system of benevolency, this one system of kind of governance that can be somehow benevolent and rule the whole entire world with a loving hand. And to me, that sounds actually spot on, because listen, I mean, what he's talking about here is really, God's kingdom, and God's kingdom being able to rule the whole world, and not fractured in all these different segments and everybody vying for power. So World War III, we have to be worried about this. We have to be considering it. What if the world gets in, some kind of nuclear conflict? It is very possible. Things could get out of hand very easily. With all that being said, it's very important that we're preparing our hearts for God's second coming. It's very near, and the time of trouble is of course yet to come, and the plagues are yet to fall upon this earth. And don't be looking forward to a rapture. It's this so-called rapture is a false teaching that's pervaded the church, and God's people very much are going to be going through the trials that are presented to them on this earth. They always have. So why is it going to be any different in the last days? The great anti-typical day of atonement is upon us. We must seek we must search our hearts for sin and be cleansed really from all unrighteousness. And this is a joyful occasion. It should be for many, who are seeking their God, and they're looking up to see the sign of the Son of Man one day soon. And this will all be over. All this conflict, all this mayhem, and all this destruction and hatred will all be over one day, and God's kingdom will be set up forever and ever. So, all right, folks. Well, with that, if you just give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, and if you have any comments, put them in the section below. Share this video. Some of the things I've talked about today, may or may not get the video banned. I don't know. So the more people see it, the better. So thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you guys on the next one. All right, bye.